his artistic journey up to now. From 2015 until June this year, he and his wife Lindy managed the Studio Art Gallery in Simonstown. I don't know if you visited that. Beautiful, beautiful space. He also founded the Alexander Art Academy, offering comprehensive art classes that focus on classical and contemporary fine art techniques and color theory. His passion for teaching is evident in his structured yet encouraging approach, guiding students of all levels to unlock their creative potential. He also has tonight, I've got some cards here, so if any of you would like to discuss it further with Marc, he's here to chat to you. And with that, let's hand it over to Marc.
Thank you, Irene. Okay, so I'm going to switch this thing on. Can everybody hear me? Good. Okay. Great. Thank you, Irene. And thank you for the privilege of getting to chat to you guys and share some things that I've learned. I hope that this evening will be helpful. And also, I'm open to questions, but we'll probably save it at the end. Okay, great. Now, for some of you who do know me, you might remember that I'm a bit of an oversharer. So, how many hours did you say? Okay, all right. Okay, good. So, we're going to essentially talk about copyright law and the use of AI in creating our artworks. What are the do's and don'ts? I think there's a lot of confusion out there. Everything is changing. You know, where are the boundaries? What can and can't we do? We could probably just start at a point by kind of defining copyright law. Let me just see where my notes are. Sorry, that's yours. There you go. Good. I'm going to try and do this with these glasses on, but anyway, let's see how it goes. Okay. Well, essentially, copyright law is the right to copy. It's kind of evolving as time goes on. You know, new court cases will change things the way we've understood it before. So it is something that grows and constantly changes. It's not easy to define, but essentially what it is copyright is the right to copy. And it's good to understand what can be copyrighted, how does that happen, and what cannot be copyrighted. So it's also the right to reproduce your artwork, to distribute your artwork, to create copies in print form or however you want to use it, or to use it on merchandise, so like create a book cover, for example, and so on. The copyright automatically belongs to you the moment the artwork is created. You don't have to do anything special. You just, essentially, if you're ever challenged, you just have to prove that you actually created the artwork. Yeah, so that's why it's good to do little videos about you in the studio doing the artwork. Okay, so copyright also automatically lasts about 70 years after you've passed on. So it will be for the whole duration of your life, and then for an additional 70 years, the copyright is still kind of in effect. So, yeah, okay, so let me just keep track here. It also remains with you even after the artwork has been sold. So even though a client might buy the artwork from you, they are not buying the copyright. The copyright is actually a completely separate commodity than the actual artwork itself. So the client can buy the artwork, and now the physical artwork belongs to them, but they may not make prints of it or use that artwork on book covers, or even put it on Instagram or Facebook or anything like that, really. So also just keep in mind, every time we make a copy, a digital copy, that is in a sense we're infringing copyright. So we all do it all the time. Any kind of copy and paste, any time we're moving videos or music or images around on the internet, we're essentially bordering on infringing somebody's copyright. Okay. Of course, it's very expensive to just sue somebody for if you do infringe on their copyright. It can run into the hundreds of thousands of rands. So it doesn't happen very often. It's usually very, very famous artists who sell the artwork for millions, and when the lawyers consider the case, they see, here's some money to be made. That's usually when something happens. Okay. Let's also just understand what cannot be copyrighted, because I think this often brings clarity. So we can see that the moment we create an artwork or take a photograph with a camera, if you're the photographer, immediately you are the holder of that copyright, as long as you can somehow prove that you took that photograph or that you created that painting or drawing or watercolor, whatever. What cannot be copyrighted is ideas and concepts, which is actually very interesting. It's got to be expressed in paint or drawing before it can be copyrighted. So you can't, if you have a great idea and you put it out there, you can't actually copyright that idea. It's got to be made into something in order for it to be copyrighted. So copyright protects the expression of ideas. Now it's become a painting. It's actually become something tangible, but not the ideas themselves. Okay. You can't copyright facts or data. That is generally in the public domain. So let's say, for example, you discover an incredible technique by mixing a couple of colors, and you put some chemical in there and something amazing happens. You can't really copyright the fact of what happened there. That data is not copyrightable. You could probably keep it a secret, well, at least try, but it's not copyrightable. Okay. Titles and short phrases. Usually the title is part of the artwork. It normally alludes to the artwork. It could be part of telling your story by giving a certain title to the artwork. That cannot be copyrighted. Anything that's in the public domain, so all public domain works cannot be copyrighted. So that would mean any artwork where the artist has been deceased for more than 70 years. It now becomes part of the public domain. Anything that the government creates, interestingly enough, cannot be copyrighted. Now this is generally US law, but we kind of follow suit with the US law. So for example, if the government commissioned, and we'll get to this in a second, a photographer, for example, to take a photograph of, let's say, Nelson Mandela when he was around, they actually cannot copyright that image. It goes straight into the public domain because it was essentially paid for by taxpayers. Now that's very interesting because in this country we had several court cases relating to images created from of Nelson Mandela or his likeness, where people applied that into artwork or whatever the case may be. And it was a controversial thing because I think Carte Blanche actually did an episode about it where the Nelson Mandela Foundation managed to get the courts to give them the copyright of Mandela's likeness. So in essence, if you wanted to do a Mandela portrait, you would have to approach the foundation first. It caused a lot of controversy, and there again, because that's very unusual. You can't really copyright a personality like the president. It's in the public domain. That image should be for the people, and artists often immortalize our leaders by creating portraits of these leaders, as long as it's kept in a good spirit. But nevertheless, I used to do many Nelson Mandela portraits at one stage, so I had a lot to do with the Nelson Mandela Foundation, as well as his family and some other business partners in Johannesburg. And I was a little bit concerned. There wasn't initially a problem because I got a model in, and the model would sit for me, and I would do a sketch, and then I would just put Mandela's features on the sketch. So thereby creating a new image. I didn't actually know that works created by the government are actually in the public domain. I didn't realize that, and because of that whole moment where everybody thought, oh, we better not. It was just before the World Cup 2010, I remember it clearly, and everybody was thinking of merchandising for the World Cup that was coming to South Africa. Anyway, the ANC did kind of vindicate me by purchasing 160 of my works in print form for Jacob Zuma's inauguration, his second inauguration. So it was interesting. Talking about Jacob Zuma, it was also interesting when Brett Murray, who created the spear artwork, it was not a flattering painting at all, that went to court, and he was dragged into court for defamation of character, and Zuma insisted that that painting should be removed from the gallery. Zuma actually lost the case there, and it was then classified as freedom of expression, and Brett Murray, look, the artwork was destroyed, kind of. I think that was also a bit of a publicity stunt in the gallery, but anyhow, okay. Good. So you cannot copyright techniques. Any art technique that you know of, or that you discover, or think that you're the first person to ever do this thing, that technique cannot be copyrighted. You can't sue somebody else if they happen to find out what your technique is and then use it. You can't copyright any methods or methodology in creating art. And you also cannot copyright any style. So if that makes sense, if you work in an impressionistic way and you decide to add a strain of realism through that, and you say you've come up with an original style, you would not be able to copyright that style. And I think the idea behind the copyright is to protect the creator of the artwork and make sure that they get their due, because why would we carry on creating if we're going to get done in every time? But it's also designed in such a way to inspire creation in others. So I think that's kind of where they're coming. It's not, to bind us so that we, that we become so afraid not to do anything lest we infringe on somebody else's copyright. It's actually to encourage us working together in community, learning and sharing from one another, to create and kind of feel that creative energy in the community. Okay. Let's just move on. Okay, any elements of nature. So if you're a photographer and something happens in nature and you photograph that phenomena, like the aurora borealis, you can't copyright that. It's a natural phenomena, and that is not copyrightable. Okay, great. So let's say, for example, a client does approach you, buys the artwork, thinks you're the best thing since sliced bread and an absolute genius. And now they want to actually create prints of that artwork that they purchased from you. What can happen is that you can now go into an agreement, or you can license the person for an extended period of time and kind of sell them the copyright. Do you guys understand what I mean? So I used to have an agent in Johannesburg many years ago when we still had agents, and this agent he loved money a lot. Very clever guy. And anyway, he asked me to do a portrait of Mandela. This was just post Mandela's passing, and he had some deal with Scoin SA, the gold coin exchange, and he needed an image that he could kind of package with the gold coin. And so he asked me to do, he commissioned me in a sense to do the image. So I did this image for him. There we go. It might look familiar. You've probably seen it from mine. My work gets copied all the time, by the way, because I put high-res images on my website. But that's actually a model that sat for me, and then I just put Mandela's features on. So I had a Zimbabwean friend who really kind of had very similar hands and a similar build to Mandela, and he would sit for me, and I would then quickly sketch him, and then I would just put the features on so that it looks like him. Now, back then, this is called a tribute to Mandela. My agent paid me 10,000 Rand for this pencil sketch. It's just a sketch that I did. It's probably about 50 by 40 centimeters. But then, because he wanted to make copies of that sketch, he then paid me a further 100,000 Rand for 3 years to use it and make as many copies as he likes during that period. So often as artists, we don't realize that our most valuable asset is actually not really the physical artwork in most cases. It's actually the spin-off from the copyright of that image. So had I just sold the print to him and said, fine, go and do whatever you want, I would have lost out quite seriously. But because I already was dealing with a copyright attorney in Johannesburg, especially around the issues of images of Mandela, I was very much aware that I can't just give him the image, I had to quantify it. Of course, he made millions of rands because he's very clever by selling prints which I had to sign and edition. So even though he could use the image, the print, it went to the printer would print them on archival paper, they would come back to me, and I would edition all of them and sign them so that it's got a real signature on.
You should charge for your signature.
Well, essentially that's what I was kind of doing. Yeah, I don't know if he managed to sell all those prints in those years, but I did stacks of them, probably a few hundred, maybe even thousands. Anyway, but yeah, you see, so that's a good thing to know as a creative, that you know the copyright is yours even if somebody purchases it from you. And if somebody purchases it from you and wants to then go ahead and make some other kind of commodity prints or whatever, you can then sell them a license or put together an agreement which says for this time period, and that can be indefinite, but for this time period, you may make copies of that and sell them and distribute them as you please. Of course, remember that the buyer does take ownership of the distribution right of the original artwork. So the buyer is entitled to resell it without contacting you as the artist. Once you've sold it to them, that redistribution or resale is then the prerogative of the owner. But they may not use that image on any commodity or anything like that. Okay, great. All right, so that's just where it comes to licensing. You can obviously take it further. There are many rules into it that concern that if you want to look into that. But yeah, also on your website, you see a lot of people put their art there, but if you do say that, like if you, for example, if you put your art on Etsy or Redbubble or Fine Art America, there is actually a place where you can say whether or not you're making the copyright of this artwork available. So let's say an ad agency. I know a friend of mine whose exhibition, Nick Whittle, I curated in Johannesburg. He sold one photographic image. He's a photographer, and he sold one photographic image for an ad campaign in the States, and they paid him £1 million. So it depends on obviously who's $1 million. That's America, the UK. Who's buying it? But it can be really lucrative. You just never know. So unless you're conscious about it, you could live your whole life without realizing, wow, I'm sitting on something valuable here. Okay, good. It also just goes without saying that I always encourage my students and the artists that I'm mentoring to photograph their work properly. Because once you've sold that artwork, it's not possible always to get the artwork back when you suddenly realize, oh, I could do something with that. So it should be a good practice from the get-go to get a high-res image of your work, because without that high-res image of the work, it's gone. So now you can think of all those artworks you've let go and that have not been photographed properly. Okay, good. Okay, let's just speak about a few terms that probably you might have heard of. So there is a rumor going around that if you change the artwork 10% or more, now let's talk about that one, then you've essentially created a new image. Now, that actually came as a backlash from Walt Disney in the early 80s. They just took anybody and everybody to court. If you were using Walt Disney images for whatever reason, on clothing designs or whatever the case may be, you can be sure that you're going to get a lawyer and end up in court. And eventually they kind of estimated that if you just change the image 10% or more, essentially you've generated or created a new image. Of course, today it doesn't work like that. It's completely changed and evolved. So just by changing the image even 90%, you can still go to court and maybe even lose the case. So it's not really the percentage of change. So let's say, for example, I go onto the internet and I find a lovely photograph of Fisher Beach, because I live there and I want to paint that and I don't have time to go photograph it myself. That's an example. Anyway, but let's say, for example, I take that image and I decide to make an artwork and I change the buildings or whatever the case would be. So essentially, the work has to be, what you're doing there is what we call derivative artwork. So the term derivative artwork means that you're deriving an artwork from an existing artwork or copyrighted image. So for example, I take that photograph of Fisher Beach, I go home to my studio, I sketch it out and I do a very painterly loose style painting of Fisher Beach. Now essentially I've created a derivative artwork using the photograph as a reference. Okay. Now should the photographer recognize the painting for whatever reason, the angle, maybe there's a seal lying in a spot that they photographed and I didn't change that, or what's that one that comes from Antarctica that goes to Fisher Beach? The sea lion, is it the sea lion? Yeah. You got that, that was a rare moment, and of course it goes up in a gallery and the photographer sees it. If it does go to court, what they're going to be looking at is not so much the percentage. They won't determine, if you've crossed the line or if this copyright has been infringed. What they want to look at is whether or not the new work is transformative. Have you transformed it? So derivative work is creating an artwork from an existing reference or copyrighted image. But a transformative artwork is that you've taken the artwork and you've transformed the concept, the meaning, and a few other things in it in a radical way. Now, it's a very grey area because usually it's only judges who can determine whether an artwork is successfully transformed. And I'll show you a few examples of some cases now. Irene, will you just tell me when there's about 15 minutes left? Because I am on page 2. All right, sorry, I'm just checking the time. Okay, so if we're thinking about a transformative artwork, it means that you've added a new expression. Now, what does that mean? That can mean anything. It means that you've slightly changed the meaning. It used to mean one thing and now it means something else. You've changed the message that was communicated through the original, whatever that message could have been. So you can see why a lot of photography, usually, unless they're a fine art photographer, they're not really thinking in these terms, like this has got a profound meaning. Of course, not all us artists who paint think in these terms either. But anyway, when it does get to court, and you're probably raking in heaps of money if you do make it to court and someone is actually suing you, you probably have it figured out, like what it means or what you've changed to make it a transformative artwork. Okay, so let me also just say, sometimes we've heard the word plagiarism, and plagiarism is very different from copyright infringement. Copyright infringement really is a legal issue. Somebody feels that you're infringing on their copyright, you're doing something you're not supposed to be doing. But plagiarism really is a moral issue, where you're trying to change the authorship of the artwork, so you're trying to say, I made this, when actually you didn't. You guys get it, plagiarism. And I think people often get confused with what is plagiarism. One thing I can encourage you guys never to do, because it's really a bad practice, is to name and shame plagiarizers on social media. I promise you that will come back to bite you in the worst possible ways. That will basically be, maybe in no certain terms, the end of your art career if you had one to start with. So there are ways of dealing with people who are infringing, or if you feel somebody's infringing on your copyright, there's a way to deal with it, but it's never a good idea just to start making blanket accusations on social media. So you guys have probably seen a few Facebook pages that do just that. They're set up solely for that purpose. And it just is a very toxic atmosphere when you start accusing people of things, and it's not open, and it doesn't have a sharing or a community. There's no communication. It's just accusation. And of course, social media has a way to amplify negative things and make the situation much worse. Okay, good. So just keep that in mind. Okay, we also get now to think of transformative work, what courts will deem fair use. And in South Africa, we call it fair dealing. South Africa and the UK. But in the States, and the term we're probably more familiar with is the fair use doctrine, as they call it. So fair use doctrine is essentially if we use copyrighted material, which could be any image that is placed on the internet. If we took that material and we created a derivative work, so we're using that as a starting point, and we are transforming it into something else. So there's a criteria and a doctrine on the internet that says if it's fair use, it's absolutely legal, and in fact they encourage you to do that. So remember, if you're worried about somebody copying your work and you have sleepless nights because of that paranoia, I'd probably not recommend putting anything on the internet. That's of course going to be very hard on your marketing, but the fair use essentially states that anybody can use portions of copyrighted work. So if it's a movie, for example, you can take a clip out of the movie if it's for the purposes of criticism. So if I was doing a book review, for example, I could take parts of chapters out and use it in the crit. If I was, a review is something else, but if I was doing a crit on something specific, like let's say, for example, I was a writer of contemporary fine art and I saw an exhibition happening and I used the image in the article to do a crit on it, that you can do. If it's satire or parody, so that's that social commentary on things that are happening in society that might be, and you can find the humor in it, or the craziness of it, or whatever, and you use the copyrighted material in that context. So satire would be fair use. This is a big one. Any educational purposes. So we need to understand that artists have always learned from copying other artists, always found inspiration. Creativity actually can't grow and thrive in isolation. That's been proven through the centuries. Okay, so educational purposes, and we'll talk about that in a second. Research, so let's say you're writing your thesis or whatever, you can use them parts of other, as long as you give due credit to where it should go, or news reporting. So let's say again, for some reason, there's a scandal and the reporting team arrive at your door. They could then photograph those artworks and put it on there, and you wouldn't be able to say, hey, you can't do that. Okay, good. So that's fair use, and you can see how that kind of opens up the end a little bit. It makes things very grey and blurry. So what you will discover, that if somebody does drag you to court, sue you for whatever, each case will have to be kind of judged individually. There's not just a blanket rule that says yes you can or no you can't, because of these rules. Now, when we just coming back to the educational one, so for example, I often would encourage my students, like for the end of the year exhibition, to do whatever they want. If they wanted to do, well, we've got a theme this year, but usually there's no theme. They can find their reference material wherever, even if it's contemporary artists. I do encourage them to keep good faith, that if the person is still living, at least just ask them. You know, sometimes people don't mind if you just ask them. Most often they actually say yes, if it's a photographer or something like that. But where was the game with this? Fair use. Oh yes, educational. So, some will say that, well, it could be educational in the classroom because we have an art academy, and in the context of that classroom, everybody's learning. So let's say many students love Lionel Smith's style. And so what we do for a lesson is we get a copy of the Lionel Smith's painting, and we deconstruct it. Now, you can see there's an educational kind of aspect to what's happening there. The challenge comes in, of course, once they put that exercise on social media, like Facebook, and want to sell it. Or let's say they want to sell it on their websites or whatever the case may be. I would argue that even the selling of the artwork is part of the education. So for me, I wouldn't necessarily have a problem if it is at a student exhibition, for example. And now the students have to think about their pricing. I teach them all the formulas and what to consider when so it is all part of a learning and growing thing. It's not really established artists that are, going to do that kind of thing. They're figuring it out. It's still kind of, I would argue, under that educational bracket. Because it has come up once or twice that if I'm copying this photograph or this image, what if the person should see that the artwork is for sale on the exhibition? Now, of course, if I'm going to curate a show, get a nice venue to put the show in, obviously I'm going to need to take a commission from that sale. There's no freeloading. You can't just put an artwork on the show that's not for sale. It's got to be for sale. Anyway, what would be the purpose otherwise? Okay. Anyway, I leave that there. That's the one grey area. We're kind of still working through it. But I'm not talking about, mass producing it and making it incredibly commercial. Yes, I've copied this Lionel Smith thing at the art classes. It came out so well. Now I'm going to print 1,000 prints of these. I'm not talking about that. That, I would agree, is crossing the line. But I would say that, what happens at the Academy, and certainly our annual exhibition, is all part of the learning process. Okay, good. I'm going to leave that there. Let's quickly talk about reproduction and art forgery, just very quickly. So, this is a long story, but anyway, I've got a little bit of history in both of those. Not that I've ever successfully sold an art forgery, but anyway, I'll leave it there. So I do reproductions, particularly of the artwork of Gustav Klimt, and this is his very famous The Kiss. This is actually a reproduction that I've done that you're looking at there. That's not the actual painting. I've done it 9 times, and the clients pay me quite a lot. I do the gilding, and I try to follow the technique as far as possible, according to how the original was made and so on. And I've got a whole video on YouTube. That's how I get the clients. A lot of the clients are foreign. So of course this artwork is in the public domain. This was created in 1912, 1911. So and Gustav Klimt died not long after the creation of this artwork. I also do a lot of other Gustav Klimt paintings, which I've done several times, but this one I've done 9 times over. Now some people might feel, wow, can you do that? Can you reproduce the work? Let me tell you, I would have a lot more outstanding school fees had I not done that. This has really helped me put my kids through school, is this kind of reproduction. And because my clients are generally foreign, they see the YouTube video. Let me tell you, YouTube has really helped me there. I would not have gotten the work without that little time-lapse video that I made. And then every now and then, some foreigner contacts me. I've first got to check that it's not a scam. But I normally get them to pay up front, the whole amount. They can already see what they're going to get. And so they pay me up front, and then it takes me 2 or 3 months to make another one, and then I just have it shipped to them. They pay for the shipping as well. Okay, so do we sign the artist's signature? Now that could be a controversial issue. Do we put Gustav Klimt on the front of the canvas like I did over there? I would say yes. If the artwork is in the public domain, which means there's no copyright stopping me from reproducing it, I would think that by putting Marc Alexander on the front of that canvas would cause a lot of confusion and also seem a bit arrogant. Here I am doing an almost perfect reproduction of a Klimt work, and I'm putting my name on it. You see how that just doesn't feel right at all. What I normally do with these paintings, I mean, look, it becomes forgery only if I try and pass this off as the real deal. Now, of course, this is one of the most famous artworks in the world. The Lady in Gold, or the Portrait of Adele Bloch-Bauer, that movie was about, I think was sold for $200 million or something like that to the Tate Gallery. So if somebody's going to pay that much, and I'm going to try and convince them that this is the real deal, firstly, I wouldn't do it on cotton duct, because I like cotton duct. It's a very strong canvas. This is a very large painting. It's 1.4 meters by 1.4 meters. And it's got to be very sturdy. So I use cotton duct for that because the weight of the gold and everything actually causes it to sag a bit. But I will write on the back of the painting, unless the client asks me not to do that. Look, why they would ask me that is their prerogative. But normally I would say reproduction by Marc Alexander, whatever the case may be. But it is highly, highly unlikely that somebody would mistake that for the original. Do you guys get what I'm saying? So if you're doing Vincent van Gogh's Starry Night or something like that, you can't go put Solly Smoke there at the bottom. It just feels totally wrong. You've got to give credit where credit's due. It might feel awkward copying Vincent, but if you write anything else there, you can see. So often my students say, well, I've done this reproduction, do I write Pierre at the bottom? Well, yes. It only becomes forgery if you try to convince a buyer that this is the real deal. Do you guys see where I'm going? And you've got to be really, really good at reproduction to create that kind of illusion. Okay, So forgery is a fascinating story. Perhaps maybe one day I'll talk about that. Okay. Good. All right. Let's just move on. Okay. So I think just in a nutshell, you guys kind of get an idea now what copyright law is about. It comes to you automatically as soon as the artwork is created. Once you sell the artwork, you are selling the physical artwork, but not the copyright of the image. So therefore, have a good photograph of that high-res image of that, otherwise you've got nothing. It's not possible to get that painting back always, and sometimes the clients won't like it. I once didn't photograph something and then had to get it back on. The client didn't like it at all. I don't think they realized that I actually print everything that I make. Anyway, but it is your prerogative. That copyright is yours, unless there is some sort of written agreement between you and the client. Okay, reproductions, I would say go for it. If it's in the public domain, feel free. There's all kinds of amazing AI things now to sharpen and to change things. Okay, so let's transition quickly just in terms of artificial intelligence and where that's at. So everything is changing. Like I started by saying, we're living in a world where change is so rapid that the laws are kind of trying to, I think they're still trying to figure out music and the internet, images. And now with the artificial intelligence, there's a lot of eruptions happening. But don't worry, they'll get on top of it. Where there's money to be made, you can be sure that somebody's working on it as quick as possible. Okay. So you may have noticed, if you love AI as much as I do, I actually use it every week. Every week or at least every second week, I create a lesson for my students. And what I like to do is, what I used to do in the past, before AI, which is 2 years ago, I used to go onto the internet and let's say we were doing impressionism, just as an example, and I would go and look for impressionistic work that I could download, fix the resolution, take to the printer, print out in A4 sheets that my students each have a reference to work from. I find that if I'm teaching a technique, it's much easier for the mind to assimilate what you see if it's already interpreted. So it's not always easy, let's say we're doing a broken color or impressionism or something like that, and I'm saying, this is the lesson, now do that. Here's a photograph. It's much harder. It's much easier if they can see an actual example of impressionism and then kind of follow the brushwork, and you guys get what I'm saying. Okay, so I used to spend a lot of time finding artist works that were absolutely exceptional. I mean, goodness, have you seen those Russian impressions? They are absolutely amazing. Anyway, I would find them a couple of their images, which I would download and kind of fix on Photoshop and then take it to the printer and print it. Now, this is all under the banner of educational purposes, and those artists are actually all living artists. But since the advent of the AI, it's much easier. It's actually cut down my preparation. I can't even explain to you how much. If I get the AI to just generate images for me. So if you're one of my students, you're probably looking at these references now, remembering the joy we had doing this. So these would be just the type of references we did, broken edges. This is just the introduction to a painterly technique. So this was palette knife work, so obviously we're going to do some sort of Van Gogh-esque type thing. And we did brushstroke economy, that's one of those grapes up there. That was the last lesson of last term. But what I like to do is, I like to give my students at least a few options, because then they feel they've got some choice in the matter. I don't like to force them to all do the same image, because I'll have a lot more complaining if that was the case. So I usually get some very simplified versions. These are, of course, the little bit more advanced ones for all the overachievers in between the mix. But I would normally have a few students in mind, and then I would kind of get at least 6 different references. So when I do the lesson afterwards, I give them these references, and they can then go wild. Now, what is amazing about the AI is that it actually generates these instantaneously. I can actually do this on a Monday morning before the class starts. Now, I've still got to get to the printer to print them out, but it is so quick, and the AI has gotten exponentially better. Like every month, there is some new crazy advancement that the AI can now suddenly do. Now, already some folk might feel, oh, I did have a couple of students who said to me they are boycotting any AI thing, they're not interested in it, they are going to resist it at every point. One student in particular, she's actually an illustrator for children's books, and she said no, she can't feel it, you know, she can't create the art if it's not coming from her entirely. And the other day, she brought her computer to the class, and she was showing me something, and I said, wow, I'm seeing AI activity here. And she said, no, she joined a collective of illustrators. Now there's 10 of them working for one company. All 9 of them use AI. And she would not have a job had she not embraced it, because she cannot, on her own, compete with the artificial intelligence. So I'm just saying it's out there. It's changing the world. It's already here. You can try swim against the stream for a while, but I would say just be free and maybe just let somebody just show you how it works. It's actually getting a lot more user-friendly as it goes. Anyway, now what is interesting is that if the artwork is not created by a human being, it cannot be copyrighted. So AI images are not copyrighted. If the AI generated the image entirely, it's not copyrighted, which is amazing. So I can sit on it and create images until my hard drive is full. Anyway, so if you want to copyright the AI image, you've got to work it, you've got to transform it in a way. And often, what I haven't mentioned yet, so part of that transformation is to actually take it from one medium to another medium. It might not be enough for some court cases, as we'll see in a few examples in a moment, but the idea that if you took a digital photograph to an oil painting with a very painterly style, you can see there's a lot of transformation that's happened in the creation of that painterly oil painting. You guys get what I'm saying? Okay, so I like this because now whatever copyright issues I might have run into, because my students sell their exercises on Facebook, which I encourage them strongly to do, and they're getting better at it. Now they can be totally free because these images have no copyright, and I don't mind it. I prompted the AI. The AI actually is understanding. It learned so fast, I can't even tell you. It's very clever. Anyway, okay. Good. Let me just see where I am. Okay, so I'm not going to speak too much about it. Look, there is now a fantastic AI that is very good at fixing an image. Like, for example, you see on a lot of websites, you can't just right-click and download the image because the website stops you from bringing down a high-res image. But all you need is a very small 20 KB file, and then you put it through Recraft, Recraft.ai, and it will fix the resolution instantly. It literally happens in 10 seconds. So you can now copy anything off the internet and up the resolution so that you can contact that artist and tell them yeah, don't do anything that your conscience won't allow you to do. Remember, we've got to live with our consciences. Okay, great. So the AI is changing everything. Soon, I don't know, people used to say, well, books will be a thing of the past. I don't know if we're quite there, even though I'm sure people still buy books. But a lot of people are saying photography will be a complete thing of the past. You won't need to have a camera because the AI can literally generate a photograph from nothing, well, from the entirety of the internet, of anything that you can imagine. And it's getting very good at it, making hyper-realistic images just by prompting it. So I could just say, instead of spending hours looking for that right image of Fisher Beach, I can just now go onto the AI, which a lot of them are still free, and say, I want a hyper-realistic image of Fisher Beach facing the Strand across the bay, or something like that. And it will generate that amazingly well. I mean, it's just absolutely incredible. Okay, good. Let's quickly touch on a couple of art movements, just so that you can see how copyright law has developed. Now, today, I did realize that there are a lot of new art movements, a lot of digital, I can't even pronounce what they're calling it, but what I'll focus on is just from our more recent past. And I'll speak specifically about Dadaism and pop art, because that's already challenged the whole notion of copyright already long ago. So if we think of Dadaism, we might think of this sculpture piece, and immediately it opens up a whole world of contemporary art. So we think of found objects. Yeah, the artist, this is Marcel Duchamp, and this artwork was created in 1917. Gee, that doesn't sound right now, so I'm sure it was 1920 or something. Anyway, oh, it is 1917 there, it says it on the artwork. And he literally took a found object, and just by changing the title, changed the entire meaning of it. And this is a very famous artwork that if you study fine art, this is going to be in the syllabus. This is the Fountain by Marcel Duchamp. He also took a postcard of the Mona Lisa and drew a little Dali moustache on it. That's a very, very famous artwork. Not altering the image much, but you can see it's challenging what society thinks about copyright and popular art and symbols in our society, and taking ownership of these things. You guys see what I'm saying? So this is already, if you're of the idea that we can never, you create all these rules that are so stringent. You've got to think about what has gone before, because a lot of this has already been unpacked in a great way. And artists always push the boundaries. And even if we were just using images for satire or fair use, or any of those terms that I mentioned earlier, you can see it's very grey area. Anyway, okay, so that's Marcel Duchamp. Then, of course, we get Andy Warhol and the whole movement of pop art, which I suppose today we can throw graffiti art in there as well. If any of you have watched Exit Through the Gift Shop, that video that was produced by Banksy. I mean, that challenges our concept of ownership and originality and, how copyright law can still be maintained. I would just say that, it's all good to challenge the norms and push the envelope, but you've got to work with your conscience. I would always say that, don't do anything to anybody that you wouldn't want them to do to you. Don't take so much from another person that you would be resentful if somebody took that much from you. And I think we always got to just have that kind of heart attitude. But let's be honest, creativity does not happen in a bubble. It's a copy and paste society we live in. We are inspired. We need to be inspired by each other and by what has gone before, and take inspiration from what others have made. Okay, so Andy Warhol, there's been a recent court case. We'll look at that one now, but let's just quickly look at another artist, Roy Lichtenstein. Also, pop art, these are images that were actually in the DC comics. So Roy Lichtenstein takes the comic strip and he turns it into a ginormous oil painting of some sort. Very famous work. They cost $1 billion if you wanted to go buy one. 1963, that's actually quite recent. All right. Okay, let me just see where I am. Okay, so let's just very quickly, I don't know how we're doing for time there, Irene. I hope you're keeping track there, because I definitely am not. No, you're joking. Are you serious?
Are you guys happy to just sit around?
Yeah. All right, okay, I'll just quickly look at these, because, you know, sometimes it's when I was starting to deal with, particularly the Nelson Mandela images, I really had to wrap my mind around copyright law and where are the limits. I certainly want to keep a clear conscience, and you know, and certainly my idea was, you know, to do it with integrity. Whenever you're dealing with a public figure, you've got to be very careful because, you know, if it is a public figure, you can very quickly build up a bad reputation if you defame somebody's character, and I don't think that's really, well, certainly not what I feel called to as an artist. Okay, so there's a couple of court cases. We can just quickly fly through them, and you can see this first one is Jeff Koons versus Art Rogers. And now Art Rogers is a photographer, and he took that photograph that you're seeing up there. Now, Jeff Koons is an American artist. He's, I think, the last I heard, he's one of the 3 highest paid living artists in the world, Jeff Koons. And so, of course, you can imagine that there would be something to gain going after an artist like Jeff Koons. Now, what he did was he created the exhibition, I think the name is there somewhere, maybe it's not. Anyway, and he took that photograph, which he bought at a museum gift shop, and then had a ceramic piece made in the likeness of that photograph. Now, technically, Jeff has transformed the image. It's part of a satire kind of exhibition. It's called Banality or something like that. It should be in my notes. Yeah, Banality. And what he did was he totally transformed it from a postcard into a ceramic piece, which I suppose in most cases would stand as a transformative artwork in court. But of course, Jeff is selling these for 20 million or however much dollars he's selling them for. And he was approached by the photographer. And being the, well, look, I've heard that, this is all hearsay by the way, that he could be quite a difficult and very hard person, Jeff Koons, and he didn't respond favorably and was quite arrogant actually about the fact that he knew he was right and nothing the artist could do or the photographer could do, so give it to him a shot, he doesn't care. Anyway, the photographer then did go to an attorney, and when the attorney contacted Jeff Koons, he was also welcomed with some of that attitude. So it then became personal. You see how these things often can happen. And in the case of Jeff Koons versus Art Rogers actually won the case, which was very surprising, but it did cause a lot of ripples in terms of copyright law and now what it is, because everybody was kind of sure they knew what it was. Now it's changed again. All right, okay, so you can see that I would say this ticks all the boxes in terms of a transformative work. Its meaning has changed completely, its context has changed completely, and the medium has changed completely. But you don't need a stretch of the imagination to see that that is the reference that that was used in this. Okay, the next one is also a case against, no, sorry, this is Richard Prince. The next Jeff Koons will come up now. Now, in this case, this artist, Richard Prince, took a coffee table book, which was called Yes Rasta by Patrick Courier, and he then transformed it with a little bit of collage work. And the court found it transformative enough that the artist won the case against and he did 30 images from the same coffee table book. Now, I wouldn't recommend that. I would say that is crossing a line. If he took 1 or 2 images here and 1 or 2 images there, but to take 30 images from the same artist book, but still the artist won the case because the work was transformative. It was transformed, and you can say, well, how much? He stuck some pieces of paper and put some paint on there. It doesn't seem as if it's transformed that much. That's why I say every case is individual. There's no blanket rule that you can really say this is going to happen or that's going to happen. Okay, good. The next one is Jeff Koons again. Now, after Jeff Koons learned his lesson, he became a lot more polite apparently, and then he used that ad from a magazine which was by Andrea Blanche, who took the photograph of those pair of shoes for that Gucci ad in that magazine. Jeff Koons used it in this artwork titled Niagara, and you can see the second pair of feet are clearly that pair of feet there. Now, of course, Jeff Koons changed his whole tactic in court, and he won the case against this photographer. So, you know, when you start thinking about it, it's like, yeah, it is a lot of grey area, and there's a lot of factors involved. That's why every case would have to be judged individually. Okay, this is Shepard Fairey. He's the graffiti artist, and he did this poster of Barack Obama. Now you can see it's totally in a kind of graffiti style. I can imagine him stenciling that all over America on the walls and whatever. But this artist, this photographer, wasn't happy that Shepard Fairey, because that image became instantly famous. It became like world known, really, and it's already been parodied 100 times. But if you look at the documentary on this whole episode, this case between these two artists, if there was just communication, they actually did end up being quite good friends. But because they worked with lawyers, anyway, I'm not saying don't use lawyers, but sometimes just communicate. If somebody offended you, or you think that somebody's crossing the line, I would always say your first step would be just to approach them and keep that channel of communication open, because you could resolve the issue. I think this court case costed $300,000 or something ridiculous. And everybody could have saved that money and put it into making more art. Anyway, okay, good. This is a recent case where an image of Andy Warhol was published in Vanity Fair, and the photographer, Lynn Goldsmith, she sued because she wasn't acknowledged or whatever, and she sued for copyright infringement. Now, I think back when Andy Warhol was doing his pop art, he most likely, the courts they did side with him. But some of these rules have changed today, and you can see even in this case, the court ruled with Goldsmith. Now, that opens up a whole can of worms, because there's a lot of Andy Warhols in circuit and being used for any and everything. And usually, you'll see, like with the Jeff Koons, that first one with the string of puppies, I think about 10 court cases came from that same show. Once the first person won a case, a lot of the other artists, because, you know, Jeff Koons is also very much an art director. You know how he creates his art. He doesn't actually make the art himself. He's got about 50 artists at any given time actually making the art for him. He's more like the artistic director that just signs the artwork. Kind of like the architect in the building. Anyway, okay, so yeah. And then one last one is the David Hockney prints. Now, what happened was, you guys know, this sold for, I think it was $99 million US in 2012, if I'm not mistaken. But a lot of the galleries in New York were just happily mass producing Hockney's work and selling off the prints in his lifetime. That's why I always say it's good to edition your prints and to sign them. I never let the printers print my actual signature. That's the only way I can actually tell if my signature has been forged or if that's a legitimate artwork, because I can see my signature. My signature has been forged at a very large auction. The work that was sold there for lots of money is not my signature. It's prints that I didn't make. That happens. But nevertheless, so I would always say that's the reason why we edition limited edition prints. You know that edition is not really going to make the artwork more valuable in your lifetime. That's a total myth. We don't edition it. I'm talking about digital prints. So if I create a painting and I have it scanned in and I make 20 prints and I sell them 1 out of 20, 2 out of 20, so on. They can't be worth more than the exact same image being in an edition of 2000. A client won't pay more for it, even if there's less. The only reason why we edition digital prints is so that we as the artist can keep track of where all those prints are if we're putting it in every second gallery all over the place. So it's like giving it a unique code or title, if you like. That edition number becomes part of the print title, if you like. Okay. Good. Let's quickly move on. Okay, great. One more thing, well, just before we do close, one more thing that I'll just quickly mention is stock photos. So there's Creative Commons licensing, like Pixabay, and there's a whole lot of sites now where you can get royalty-free images or copyright-free images. And now there's a lot of them on the internet. I don't actually know how stock photo people actually make money these days. I think that business is basically a thing of the past. But anyway, you can actually, I wrote to Getty's because I wanted to do a Mandela painting of a particular photograph that Getty South Africa had on their stock photo thing. Now, you know, when you purchase a stock photo image, you're purchasing the licensing or the copyright of that image. You've just got to check if there are limitations on mass production of the painting. So I wrote Getty's a letter to say, I want to purchase that image and I'm going to make a painting and then I'm going to make 1 million prints of that painting. Is that okay? And they wrote back and said, if you pay that license, you can make 2 million prints if you like. So as long as that agreement is clear, because, you know, so if you wanted to get something, sometimes we think, oh, I want to pay $2 for a stock photo. But you can literally get anything, and it generally gives you a lot of, you can then create a derivative work that you can then become the copyright owner of, and then make prints from those stock photo images. You see, you don't know if you don't know. Anyway, I just put that out there. Let me just see what else I've got about that. Okay, so Creative Commons sites, you can go and check them out. There are so many. Or just type that in the Google. You'll find anything and everything, from snow leopards to, you name it. Anything, high-res images. So there the photographers have relinquished their copyright. They put them in the public domain, all those hundreds and thousands of images. Okay, I would recommend a book called Steal Like an Artist. I don't know if any of you have ever read it. It's by Austin Kleon, K-L-E-O-N, Kleon. Steal Like an Artist. Now, in this book, he's kind of talking about the challenges that creators face these days and the fact that creativity can't thrive in a vacuum. We need to be inspired. We need to learn and glean from others, not just for the sake of copying what they do, but reinterpreting, growing, and then putting our own voice to it. Because if you think of it, there isn't really anything really new under the sun. If we think of originality, Everything, well, maybe somebody might come up with something new, but that's not often. I think everything has been painted very many times. We had a case at the gallery once where we had a very big exhibition, and this chap came in and there was a painting of a zebra that had, instead of black and white stripes, the stripes were like red and black. Now, this person was convinced that his famous son, who lives in England, his copyright had been infringed upon by this artist that was showing this work in our gallery. Anyway, I immediately took the work off because, you know, you don't want to cause unnecessary eruptions. I contacted the son, and he was absolutely, don't worry, it's totally not his. You see, so because everything has been done, it's like you'll think you're doing it, and this is original, no one else has ever thought of this. But if you look deep enough, you'll see that it's probably a composite of many distilled ideas that have come down to where it is today. And that's how creativity works. It's a community of creatives, and we all kind of learning and pushing each other, and it certainly does not happen in a vacuum. So you guys probably recognize these two chaps. Now these quotes are mentioned in that book, and I think the principle behind it, this is Pablo Picasso, and he says, good artists copy, great artists steal. Now, at first, when I heard that, I was a little bit shocked. And David Bowie repeats the same sentiment by saying, the only art I'll ever study is the stuff that I can steal from. Now, let me just say, what they actually mean is not in any kind of criminal way. What they mean is this kind of gleaning and finding inspiration and then turning it into something new. Understanding how the creative process actually works. Certainly, neither of these artists just grew up in a vacuum. And if you think of Picasso, I mean, father of Cubism, he is a genius. I think a lot of us have gleaned a lot from him. So I think, you know, just to sum up all of this, it does depend on your heart attitude. I've met artists who obsess so badly that people are copying their stuff, and they have sleepless nights about it. And then they're writing all kinds of nasty letters and getting the law involved. Look, unless you can make lots of money, like you're going to sue Jeff Koons or somebody like that, I would say, is it really worth the headspace and trauma that whole process is going to cause? The only person that's going to win there really are those legal people.
Yeah.
Anyway, I would say, you know, the best thing is to be free. And like I said, if you are compositing images or gleaning ideas or putting things together, absolutely, that's what we're supposed to do, and that's how we have learned. It's actually more like a collective kind of, I don't want to say energy, that sounds a bit weird, but that's what's happening in the art communities. You can't be creative in absolute isolation. I'm not saying you can't make something, that you probably do it, but it's got to be relevant in our culture, in our day and age. All the mediums are changing. I mean, I just think how amazing acrylic paint has become just in the last 10 years. It never used to be like that. Anyway, everything's changing, and now, of course, we got AI to assist us be more creative. I would say just keep an open mind and yeah, go for it. Any questions? I don't know how we're doing for time. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Good. There we go.
Can you give us a name or two of any AI platforms or whatever you want to call them?
Okay. Yeah, sure. The free one, if you got the latest Microsoft, so Microsoft, if you pay for the Microsoft account, so it's Microsoft 11, I think, I'm not sure, it's got a little tab, which a lot of people just don't notice. It's on the right-hand side of the search engine screen. It's got like a little kind of icon. You click on that, and then you just tell it whatever you want. That's where I got those images from Microsoft. The problem is that it will give you 4 images. So let's say you want, I'm looking for a vineyard in the style of Vincent van Gogh, but make it more expressive and use a triadic color scheme, something like that. You can prompt it in any which way you want, and the AI will then generate 4 square images. Now, I've got Photoshop, which I pay for every month, and Photoshop is just, I mean, I just can't keep up with the way that the AI is changing. It's like overnight. So I can then take those square images into Photoshop, and I can just, with a crop tool, pull it out, and it will fill it in and give me samples. So let's say I want the Fisher Beach scene, but I'm not getting those mountains in on the side because it's not giving me a square image. I put it into Photoshop, and I just crop it out, and I say generate, and it fills in the image. I mean, it is absolutely amazing. It does it instantly. I mean, you don't even have to wait 2 seconds. It's so good. But there are very many free sites. I was actually shocked. So the Recraft.ai is absolutely amazing because that one ups the resolution. It upscales the image. So if you've got a very poor quality image, and you want to get a clearer version or a sharper image, it's not going to change the colors or anything like that. It just fixes that image and it makes it very clear and sharp. It just ups the resolution instantly. And then also with that Recraft, you can put in a Lionel Smith painting, for example, and say this is a new style. And then you can tell it to generate anything in that style, and it does it. You can put in a photograph of some family members, and because you've already got that style of Lionel Smith uploaded, you can tell the Recraft to generate, and it generates 3 images of that photograph in that style, that painterly style. So in terms of reference material, I mean, the AI is moving so fast. That happened recently. I was actually, Recraft's been out for about 6 months, but I only used it a few weeks ago. I couldn't stop speaking about it to my students, so they all know. But anyway, yeah. And then there's a lot of editing AI software. There's so many, I actually can't keep track of it now. So look, they give you like a free version, and then they'll usually limit how many prompts you can do a day. And a lot of them, if you generate an image, the image is visible to everybody, unless you get the paid version. So let's say I'm doing an ad campaign, and I'm a designer or a graphic designer, and I want to create a unique logo. Then I have to pay for the thing, and it's like $10 a month or something like that. And then it will stop the general public from seeing those images. Yeah, so I could use it then, or something like that.
It's like
Copilot, yes.
Can you give us some information about NFTs?
NFTs! I would say NFTs, non-fungible tokens. You're probably asking because somebody's emailed you and says they love your artwork. Do you have it available as NFTs? That is a bit of a scam at the moment. So sorry to bring you down, but what is happening is that the blockchain needs to be populated with images. So they're trying to create this whole database of images, which probably in a few years' time will all be more on top of it. But at the moment, what happens is somebody sends your Facebook page a notice, and it's actually an automated thing, which then tells you you're amazing, you're a genius. Please, can we buy this for in NFTs? And I've got a budget of $10,000 or something like that. Those type of emails. So what they want you to do is then to get an account on one of the blockchains, and you've got to pay to upload those images, and then you never hear from them again. So been there, done that. Anyway, but I'm not saying that in some time in the future NFTs will become a commodity. Like today we've learned it's not just the physical artwork. Sometimes that digital image is worth much more than that original drawing or painting or whatever.
I just want to ask you quickly, based on your Mandela series that you did, when people say famous people can't be painted because of copyright, is that because of their famous face, or is it because of the photographer's photograph of that famous face? How does
Yeah.
that work?
Just to come back to the Mandela images, yeah, so generally a president of a country is in the public domain.
Or just a famous person, not necessarily a politician, like David Bowie.
Yeah. Look, yeah, so let me just speak about the president, because governmental works or commissions are not copyrightable. So I could use Mandela despite what the court said about the foundation. Look, it's very tricky and I wouldn't want to aggravate them unnecessarily. But yeah, so if governmental commissions and things are not copyrightable, there shouldn't be a problem. Now, a famous person like David Bowie, or like the Prince image that Andy Warhol used without permission from that photographer, that's a different story. There, the copyright lies with the photographer who has photographed that.
So it's not necessarily their face, it's the photograph.
It's
of
the
face.
specific photograph, like that image of you see, I'm infringing on copyright right here. I have changed this slightly, both of these with the AI. In fact, that Picasso's got his hands like this, and I didn't like it because his fingers were cut. So I just edited it out in 2 seconds with the AI. And David Bowie's head was chopped off, so the AI just fixed that for me as well. So have I created new images? Well, who knows, a judge can say. But yeah, look, I mean, I think as far as possible, you know, if you're going to do a show and you want to do it based on famous people, and the only reference sources you can get are from photographs that have been taken by various photographers, I can almost guarantee you those are probably copyrighted. Look, you can probably change the context and change the style, and look, even that Obama image was transformed sufficiently. I don't think there should have actually been a problem there. But, you know, anybody can still sue anybody for anything. So I would probably just get the AI to generate those famous faces for you. Anyway, yeah, look, I mean, it does change everything, and we just haven't realized it yet. I think we're all like in this kind of limbo, like waiting to see what's going to happen. I think that not everything is going to be good in the long run, because it's actually scary how fast it's developing and learning and all of that. Yes?
I just wanted to ask, how do you decide on how many prints you make of something?
Okay. So print editions, remember in the old days we were doing etchings or silk screen or some sort of handmade printing system that we would use, and those printing methods would deteriorate. So very often, like an etching, you would do probably 20, maybe 40, maybe even 60. If you went to 60, you'll see that the plate starts deteriorating and the image isn't as great as the original. So that is then very sensible that the artist proof, and there can be 5 or 6 or 10 of them, and then a very small edition, because the buyer will know that he's actually got the best print in the earlier, the first, if they could get the 1 out of 20, that's usually the one. So I worked on the acquisitions committee for the Pretoria Art Museum many years ago, and we would always want one, if it was an etching or a silk screen or something like that, a hand-printed thing, we would want one of those first 3 prints if we were going to acquire it into the museum's collection. But for digital printing, I mean, you can print 1 million images and they will be identical. So there's no, you don't have that deterioration happening. A lot of artists, look, I'm not going to argue with you if you insist on only making 20 prints. That's up to you. But a lot of artists feel that it's worth more if there's only 20, because they've heard all this negative chatter about commercializing their stuff and they're prostituting themselves and blah, blah, blah. You know, the usual nasty comments. And that's probably why we got so many poor artists. I'm joking. No, I'm joking, but it's not good business sense to limit it for that reason, because my wife and I own the gallery, and I've been involved with galleries for a very long time. People won't pay more because the edition is smaller. If that print is 2,000 Rand or 2,500 Rand, print this size on 100mm paper or something like that, it's been made digitally, and it's got 1 out of 20, right next to that will be another artist who's got 1 out of 1,000 or 1 out of 5,000. The client, I've never found a client that is upset because there's 1,000 or 5,000 prints in an edition. So for me, because I've got 4 children who don't stop eating and cost me a fortune, I've quickly had to think about how I could bring this passive income in, just to keep, the roof over our heads and all of that. And I learned from Bowen Bushier, the artist that did those baobab trees. And I went to a gallery when we were living in Johannesburg, and I saw a Bowen Bushier, and I saw it was 200 and something out of 500. And it was selling for 4,500 Rand in this gallery. So let's say the gallery takes 50% of that sale. Bowen usually sells, what I heard through the grapevine, those original drawings go for about 150,000 Rand. But an edition of 500 prints is 2.7 million profit to the artist. Why would you not do it? I mean, it just is insane. I'm not saying it's easy to sell 500 prints, but if you limit it to 20, I probably should not be telling you all this. Anyway, yes?
Is it bad practice if I initially say I will do 40, say, sheet lay prints, and then at some stage I realize they're selling quite well, and I do another 40?
Change the size. Change the size.
Oh, change the size.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can have editions. So I've got 3 sizes, a small, medium, and large, for my canvas prints and all my paper prints. But each edition has 500 prints in it. I was planning on making it 5,000 at one stage, but I've already made everything. So if I put everything in print now, it will be 5,000. Or you can do an open edition. An open edition, like Alf Kamala, the photographer, he did the opening. I did a show in Johannesburg, Legacy, and he did the opening for me. And I went to his photographic studio in Soweto, and his prints are, and their photographic prints are open edition. They were 25,000 Rand for one print photograph. But they weren't editioned at all. So you can do that. That's not a problem. But the problem is you lose track of where everything is. And not just that, some galleries won't take an open edition, even if it is digitally printed. So just keep that in mind. So sometimes, just for the sake of appeasing the gallery, they want an editioned print. But an open edition, I don't see what the difference is. Like I mentioned, I only edition them so I can keep track of where they are and who's I've sold to where and so on.
So can you paint a painting and sell it,
Yes,
original, but still sell the prints as well?
yes,
Do
absolutely.
you have to disclose that?
No.
To the buyer? You can do whatever you
It's
want.
a general law. Everybody should be aware of it. So just because the client doesn't know, that doesn't mean that they can do anything. They can't do anything. The client can't print that or photocopy that or photograph it and put it on any system. You still have the copyright of that artwork unless there's a document that states this client, you waiving your copyright or you're giving your copyright to this client for this purpose. They're printing 2025 calendars and they're going to put your image on there for that job or for this duration. You can then sell that copyright to the client at an additional cost. So when clients, and this only happened once, when a client, because I used to tell the clients, well, they'd come into the gallery and see the work, buy the work, and then they would see canvas prints and paper prints of the original artwork. There was a moment where a client didn't like that. And then I said to them, well, they can pay me more if they give me triple what that painting is worth. They can have that copyright. I won't make any prints from it. Needless to say, they didn't. They did take the original, but they were okay with it. You see, I think a lot of people just don't understand how it actually works.
Is it frowned upon? Is it bad practice? Is it...
To make prints of your work.
If a buyer buys a painting and thinks they're getting the only one...
No, that's ignorance is not your responsibility to educate them, but you can if you want to. But let me just say, if the client commissions you, that's a different story. So I commission you, so those works can't be copyrighted by you. If you're in the employment of somebody, like the artists, the 50 artists that make Jeff Koons art for him, they can't put ownership on it. Or if they've used his tools and his paints and he's kind of directed them, he owns the copyright. It's the same if I work for an ad agency and I design a logo. I can't put my copyright, that's the ad agency's copyright, because they employ me, I'm in the employment of it. So if a client gets you to paint their dog, and you think, wow, this has turned out so well, then we make 1 million prints, you will be crossing the line there actually. But normally, if you just ask the client, I think, the community should be wanting to help artists. And it's really tough being an artist. And if people actually realize, if they just understand that by letting you do that and not causing an issue, they're actually helping you. Of course, they're going to pay you the right amount and not try to get you to sell it at half price. Good. I see Irene in my periphery, huh? All right.
Irene, can we maybe have a whole lecture on pricing?
I will, yes.
Yeah. Don't forget it's right here for the academy. And just before we go, these 2 items are for sale. Please chat to Solly in the front about them. And now I think we'd just like to say thank you to Marc.
There we go. Well, thank you guys. That was a great pleasure. And my number is, if you guys wanted to, you can look at our website. We've got an art academy in Fishhook and in Claremont. Actually, we used to use this venue here. But we use the Rotary Club of Kirstenbosch, which is on the other side of the fence over there.